Don't
Four
do
brides
this.
saw his son
Please,
and
look at
ran.
me.
She saw
I
the
came
same
all this
boy,
way. You can't just
knelt
send me
beside
back.
him, and finally understood why she had traveled 1,000 miles to find home. Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories' new emotional tales every day. The whispers in Cedar Ridge traveled faster than tumbleweeds in a dust storm. Every person in town knew about Samuel Weston. They knew about the brides who came and the brides who left. They knew about the wagons that arrived at his ranch with hopeful women clutching their travel bags. And they knew about those same wagons returning to town within days, sometimes hours, with those women demanding immediate passage back east. 4 brides in 2 months. Not a single one had lasted longer than 5 days. The postmaster, old Henry Dawson, kept a running count on a small chalkboard behind his counter. He never showed it to customers, but everyone knew it was there. Everyone knew the number kept climbing. What nobody knew was why. Samuel Weston himself stood at the edge of his property on that October morning, watching the familiar dust cloud approaching from town. Another wagon, another bride, another week of hoping, followed by another crushing disappointment. He removed his worn hat and ran calloused fingers through his sandy brown hair. At 36 years old, he had already lived enough heartbreak for 3 lifetimes. The wrinkles around his green eyes told stories of sleepless nights and silent prayers. His broad shoulders, strong from years of working the land, seemed to carry invisible weights that no one could see. The wagon grew closer. Samuel took a deep breath and prepared himself for the inevitable look of horror that would cross this new bride's face. He prepared himself for the quick excuses, the sudden illnesses, the invented family emergencies that would send her running back to civilization. He prepared himself for another failure. But what Samuel Weston did not prepare himself for was Eleanor Price. The wagon stopped at his gate, and the driver helped down a woman unlike any who had come before. She was not dressed in fancy silks or elaborate bonnets. She wore a simple gray dress, practical boots, and her dark hair was pulled back in a modest bun. She was not conventionally beautiful in the way the other brides had been, but there was something in her face, something in her steady hazel eyes, that made Samuel's breath catch in his chest. She carried only one small bag. The driver handed her the bag and tipped his hat. Before leaving, he whispered something to her, something Samuel could not hear. The woman listened, nodded once, and then turned to face the ranch. She did not flinch. She did not gasp. She simply looked. Samuel walked toward her slowly, his boots crunching on the dry ground. When he reached her, he stopped several feet away, giving her space, giving her the opportunity to run like all the others. She did not run. Instead, she extended her hand like a man would, a firm, decisive gesture. Samuel shook it. Her grip was strong. He found his voice, rough from disuse. He spent most of his days in silence now, talking only to his horses and the wind. He said his name was Samuel Weston, though he supposed she already knew that. She said her name was Eleanor Price, but most people called her Ellie, and she preferred it that way because Eleanor sounded like someone who attended fancy parties, and she had never been that sort of person. Samuel almost smiled. Almost. He told her he should probably warn her about something before she unpacked her bag. Ellie said the driver had already warned her about everything. The whole town had warned her. The postmaster had taken her aside and shown her his chalkboard with the number 4 written on it. The general store owner had offered her a standing discount on return passage tickets. The preacher's wife had actually cried while describing the poor unfortunate women who had come before her. Samuel waited for the fear to creep into her eyes. It did not come. Ellie said she had come all the way from Ohio, which was a very long journey, and she did not intend to turn around before she even saw the house. Samuel nodded slowly and gestured for her to follow him. They walked up the long dirt path toward the ranch house. It was a large structure, built with care many years ago. The wood was weathered but solid. The windows were clean. The porch was swept. Everything about the exterior suggested a man who took pride in his home. Ellie noticed all of this. She also noticed the small garden to the side of the house, carefully tended. She noticed the horses in the nearby corral, well fed and healthy. She noticed the chickens in their coop, the barn standing tall and maintained, the fences in good repair. This was not the home of a lazy man. This was not the home of a cruel man. This was the home of someone who worked hard and cared about the details. So why did the brides keep leaving? Samuel stopped at the front door. He turned to face her, and Ellie saw something in his eyes that she had not expected to see. Fear, not anger, not frustration, not resignation. Pure, raw fear. He asked her if she was ready. Ellie said she was. Samuel opened the door. They stepped inside, and Ellie understood everything. The front room was warm and clean, decorated with simple furniture and colorful quilts. A fire crackled in the hearth. Books lined the shelves. Everything spoke of comfort and care. And sitting in a small rocking chair by the window, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a child, a little boy, perhaps 6 years old, with sandy hair like Samuel's, and eyes that seemed to look at everything and nothing at the same time. His head tilted at an unusual angle. His hands moved in repetitive patterns, fingers twisting and untwisting. He made soft sounds that were not quite words. Standing behind him was an elderly woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders. She must have been the housekeeper, the caretaker, the one who had been holding everything together while bride after bride came and went. Ellie looked at the child. The child did not look at Ellie. Samuel's voice was barely a whisper when he spoke. He said his name was William. He was his son. His wife had passed away from fever when William was 2 years old, and William had been different from the first day of his life. The doctors in the city had used many words to describe his condition, but none of them had been able to help him. He would never speak normally. He would never act like other children. He would need care for the rest of his life. He paused, his jaw tight with emotion. Every bride who had come, he continued, had seen William and made their decision within hours. Some had been polite about it. Some had not. One had called the child a burden that no sensible woman should be expected to bear. Another had suggested he send William away to an institution and pretend he had never existed. Samuel's voice cracked when he said he would never do that. William was his son, his blood, his heart, walking outside his body. He would care for him until his last breath, and any woman who wanted to be his wife would need to accept that. He looked at Ellie, waiting for the inevitable. Ellie was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked slowly across the room and knelt down in front of William's rocking chair. She did not try to touch the child. She did not try to force eye contact. She simply knelt there, at William's level, and waited. Several minutes passed in silence. The elderly housekeeper watched with wide eyes. In all the weeks she had worked here, in all the brides who had come and gone, not a single one had done this. Not a single one had taken the time to simply be present with William. Finally, William's repetitive hand movements slowed. His head turned slightly, not quite toward Ellie, but in her general direction. Ellie spoke softly. She said she had a younger sister back in Ohio, named Ruth. She was different too, in her own way. She could not hear because she had been born without the ability, and she saw the world differently than most people did. When Ellie was young, other children had called Ruth names. Other families had suggested her parents send Ruth away. Her voice grew thick with emotion as she continued. But Ruth was the kindest soul she had ever known. She noticed things that others missed. She felt things that others ignored. She was not broken. She was simply built different, and different was not the same as less. She looked up at Samuel, her hazel eyes glistening with unshed tears. She said she had answered his advertisement, not because she was desperate, not because she had no other options, but because she was tired of a world that had no room for people like her sister. She was tired of pretending that different was something to be ashamed of. She said she had come to find a family, and if Samuel would have her, she believed she had found one. Samuel could not speak. The elderly housekeeper, whose name was Martha, excused herself to the kitchen. Ellie could hear her quietly weeping, with what sounded like relief. The days that followed were unlike anything Samuel had experienced since his wife's death. Ellie did not complain about the hard work. She rose early and helped with the chores. She learned to gather eggs and tend the garden. She asked questions about the horses and listened carefully to Samuel's answers. But most importantly, she learned William. She learned T. Hat the child loved the color blue and would stare at the sky for hours with something like joy in his eyes. She learned that William hated sudden loud noises, but was calmed by soft singing. She learned that the little boy understood far more than he could express, and that his different way of experiencing the world was not empty, but overflowing. On the third day, Ellie was sitting in the garden with William, both of them watching a bird hopping among the wildflowers. William made his soft, wordless sounds, and Ellie hummed along as if they were having a conversation. And then it happened. William's small hand reached out and touched Ellie's arm. It was brief. It was gentle. It was over in a second. But Samuel, watching from the porch, felt tears streaming down his face. His son had not voluntarily touched anyone but him and Martha in over a year. The doctors had said he might never seek out human contact. They had said he lived in his own world, unreachable by others. But Ellie had reached him. That night, after William was asleep, Samuel and Ellie sat on the porch watching the stars. The silence between them was comfortable, easy in a way that surprised them both. Samuel finally spoke. He asked why she had really come all this way. The whole truth. Ellie was quiet for a long moment. Then she told him, back in Ohio, she had been engaged once. A man named Charles, from a good family, with a promising future. She had loved him, or thought she had. The wedding date had been set. The dress had been made. Everything had been perfect. And then Charles had met her sister Ruth. Ellie's voice hardened as she continued. Charles had been polite to Ruth's face, but afterward he had pulled Ellie aside. He had said he understood that she loved her sister, but surely she did not expect Ruth to be part of their lives after marriage. Surely she would agree to limit visits, to keep Ruth at a distance, to protect their future children from being exposed to someone so unfortunate. Ellie had removed her engagement ring and placed it in Charles's hand without saying a word. She had walked away from that life, from that future, from everything she had known. She had seen Samuel's advertisement in a newspaper months later. A widower seeking a bride, willing to relocate, must be patient and kind. The advertisement had been simple. but something about it had called to her. And now she knew why. Samuel reached across the space between them and took her hand. His grip was gentle, questioning. Ellie did not pull away. The fourth day brought an unexpected visitor. A fancy carriage arrived at the ranch, and a well-dressed man stepped out. He was perhaps 55 years old, with silver hair and cold eyes. Behind him came a nervous-looking man in a suit, carrying a leather case filled with papers. Samuel's expression darkened when he saw them. Ellie watched as he walked out to meet the visitors, his shoulders tense with anger. The man introduced himself loudly, clearly intending for everyone to hear. He said his name was Victor Weston, and he was Samuel's uncle. He had come regarding the matter of young William's welfare. Samuel's voice was low and controlled. He said there was nothing to discuss. William was fine. William was loved. William was staying exactly where he was. Victor's cold eyes swept over the ranch, then landed on Ellie standing on the porch. "Another bride," he said with contempt. "How long would this one last? A week? A day?" Ellie walked down from the porch and stood beside Samuel. Victor studied her with disdain. He told the nervous man in the suit to show Samuel the papers. He had petitioned the territorial court for custody of his great-nephew. He intended to place William in a proper facility where he could receive appropriate care from trained professionals. Samuel's hands clenched at his sides. Victor continued, his voice dripping with false concern. He said this was for the best. Samuel could not possibly provide what William needed. He could not even keep a wife for more than a week. What kind of stability was that for a child, especially a child with such serious conditions? 4 brides in 2 months. The whole territory was talking about it. The nervous man handed Samuel a stack of legal papers. Samuel looked at them, his face pale. Ellie asked what was happening. Samuel explained in a hollow voice. Victor had been trying to take William since the day his wife died. Victor had never approved of Samuel's marriage. He believed the child would be better off locked away in some institution where Victor would never have to see him, never have to be reminded that the Weston family had produced someone different. Victor interrupted sharply. He said he was trying to help. He was trying to protect the family name. And look at this ranch. Look at this life. Look at the 4 failed marriages in 2 months. What judge would grant custody to a man who could not even maintain a household? The nervous lawyer cleared his throat. He said the hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. If Samuel could not demonstrate a stable home environment by then, the court would likely rule in Mr. Victor Weston's favor. They left, the carriage disappearing in a cloud of dust. Samuel stood frozen, the papers crumpling in his grip. Ellie gently took the papers from his hands and read them carefully. The legal language was complicated, but the meaning was clear. Victor was arguing that Samuel's inability to maintain a marriage demonstrated instability. He was arguing that William needed professional institutional care. He was arguing that a single father with a demanding ranch could not possibly meet the child's complex needs. Ellie looked at Samuel. She said she had an idea, but it would require him to trust her completely. Samuel asked what she had in mind. Ellie said one word: marriage. Samuel stared at her. Ellie explained quickly. The court was concerned about stability. The court wanted to see a proper household. If Samuel had a wife, a real wife, someone who could testify about the care William received, someone who could demonstrate that the home was loving and complete, the judge would have no grounds for removal. Samuel shook his head slowly. He could not ask her to do that. They barely knew each other. Marriage was a serious commitment. He could not trap her in a legal arrangement just to save his son. Ellie stepped closer to him. She said it would not be a trap. She said she had felt more at home in this ranch in 4 days than she had felt anywhere in her entire life. She said she had watched him with William and seen a father's love so pure, it took her breath away. She said she had already started to imagine a future here, a real future with him and William and whoever else God might send their way. She said she was not proposing a temporary solution. She was proposing forever. Samuel's eyes searched hers for any sign of doubt, any hint of hesitation. He found none. He asked if she was certain. Ellie said she had never been more certain of anything in her life. They were married 3 days later in the small church in Cedar Ridge. The postmaster, old Henry Dawson, attended the ceremony with tears in his eyes. He had erased the number 4 from his chalkboard that morning and written a single word instead: married. The townspeople, who had whispered and gossiped and placed bets on how long the newest bride would last, now sat in the pews and watched something they had never expected to see. Samuel Weston, the un-Luke Kai widower, smiling. Actually smiling. Martha sat in the front row with William in her lap. The little boy made his soft sounds throughout the ceremony, and nobody shushed him. Nobody looked uncomfortable. The people of Cedar Ridge had watched 4 brides come and go, and they had finally found one worth keeping. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ellie did something unexpected. She walked over to William, knelt down, and whispered something in the child's ear. William's hand reached up and touched Ellie's face. The congregation gasped. Samuel's tears fell freely. 2 weeks later, they stood before Judge Patterson in the territorial courthouse. Victor Weston sat on the opposite side, his lawyer beside him, a stack of papers in front of them. The judge reviewed the case file. He looked at Samuel. He looked at Ellie. He looked at the written statements from Martha, from the town doctor, from the preacher and his wife, from a dozen citizens who had submitted testimony about the care William received. He asked Ellie to approach the bench. Ellie walked forward, her hands steady, her voice clear. The judge asked her why she had married a man she had known for only a week. Ellie answered without hesitation. She said love was not measured in time, but in truth. She said she had met her husband's son before she had even spoken to him, and in that moment, she had known. She had known that this was where she belonged. She had known that this family needed her, and she needed them. The judge asked if she understood what caring for William would require. The years of patience, the challenges ahead, the sacrifices that would be demanded. Ellie said she understood completely. She said her sister Ruth had taught her that the greatest blessings often came wrapped in what the world called burdens. She said William was not a burden to be endured, but a gift to be treasured. She said any court that could not see that was looking with the wrong eyes. The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he shuffled his papers, signed something with a flourish, and announced his decision. Custody would remain with Samuel Weston. The petition was denied. This case was closed. Victor stood up, his face twisted with fury. He demanded to know how the judge could make such a decision based on the marriage that was clearly arranged just to influence the court. The judge looked at him calmly. He said he had been sitting on this bench for 25 years. He had seen every kind of marriage, every kind of family, every kind of love. He could tell the difference between a sham and the real thing. He said what he saw before him was the real thing. Victor stormed out without another word. Samuel and Ellie walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. William was with Martha in a nearby carriage, waiting for them. Samuel stopped on the steps and turned to face his wife. He said he did not know how to thank her. He said she had saved his family. He said she had given him hope when he had none left. Ellie smiled softly. She said he had saved her too, in ways he did not understand yet, but would someday. They walked to the carriage together. William made his soft sounds when he saw them, and his hand reached out toward Ellie. Ellie took it gently. The four of them headed home. That evening, Samuel and Ellie sat on the porch again, watching the sun set over the mountains. Martha had taken William inside for his evening routine. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, complete. Samuel spoke into the golden silence. He said 4 brides had come to this ranch. 4 women had looked at his son and seen a reason to leave. 4 times he had watched Hope drive away in a wagon. But the 5th bride had looked at his son and seen a reason to stay. Ellie leaned her head against his shoulder. She said she had spent her whole life searching for a place where being different was not a curse but a blessing. She said she had finally found it. Samuel put his arm around her. The stars began to appear overhead, one by one, like promises being made and kept. Inside the house, William's soft humming drifted through the open window. It was not a melody anyone else would recognize. It was not a song from any hymnal or music book. But to the 2 people on the porch, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. It was the sound of home. It was the sound of family. It was the sound of love, real and true and lasting. And in the years that followed, whenever anyone asked Ellie about that first week at the Weston Ranch, she would smile her quiet smile and say the same thing every time. She would say that 4 brides had looked at that little boy and seen their reason to leave.
Please, look at me.
But she had looked at that little boy and seen her reason to live. Some people traveled their whole lives searching for where they belonged. Ellie had found her place in the first 4 days, and she had never looked back.
Hi, my name is William Sunny, the owner and manager of Iron Cowboy Gardena. After watching the video, 2 brides left him every month. None lasted a week, until she arrived. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stood out to me most was how loneliness can make people build walls without even realizing it. Everyone judged him by the rumors and the women who left. But sometimes the truth about a person only shows up when someone finally stays long enough to understand them. I liked how this story slowly unfolded through patience instead of big dramatic moments. Do you think she saw something in him that the others missed? And have you ever changed your opinion about someone after getting to know their real story? I think this kind of reminder matters in everyday life too. Sometimes people need understanding more than assumptions. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy these mountain stories about trust, resilience, and unexpected connection, feel free to stay connected with Iron Cowboy Gardena.